Inside of the concentration camps established during the Second World War, there were many different women who worked as guards for the SS. Some of the most evil women associated with horrific crimes and treatment inside of the camps were sentenced to death and were executed in war crimes trials, and the courts would hear of the terrible acts that women such as Irma Grese committed. But at the end of the war, one of the most despicable camps which was liberated was Bergen-Belsen, and the British liberators discovered a site in meltdown. There were around 13,000 corpses lying unburied around the site, and it was at Belsen and Frank, and over 70,000 people succumbed to the conditions. The guards who remained here at the end of the war were arrested, and what shocked many was the fact that many young women had been responsible for the evil what occurred inside. But what is the story of the evil princesses of Bergen-Belsen? To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. In August 1943, a women's camp was added at Bergen-Belsen, and this was a specific part of the site which held thousands of young women and girls. Many were sent from other sites around Germany, and the first women who were sent there were Polish. As the end of the Second World War came about, thousands of more inmates were sent to Bergen-Belsen from other places to prevent them falling into the hands of the Allies. Eastern concentration camps were evacuated before the advancing Red Army got there, and at Bergen-Belsen the number of inmates went up to around 60,000 by April 1945, which was roughly 6 times the capacity. Because of this, there were disease epidemics and a huge amount of starvation, which was killing the prisoners on a daily basis. The British liberators, when they arrived at Belsen, were greeted by the horrific sight. One of the British reporters described the scenes. He said, "Here, over an acre of ground, lay dead and dying people. You could not see which was which. The living lay with their heads against the corpses, and around them moved the awful ghostly procession of emaciated, aimless people, with nothing to do, with no hope of life, unable to move out of your way, unable to look at the terrible sights around them. Babies had been born here, tiny wizened things that could not live. A mother, driven mad, screamed at the British sentry to give her milk for her child, and thrust a tiny mite into his arms, then ran off crying terribly. He opened the bundle and found the baby had been dead for days. This day at Belsen was the most horrible of my life." To help clean up the camp, the British needed more people to help deal with the dead bodies, and they put to work the captured SS guards who had remained at the site. It was believed they had stayed here to ensure that law and order was maintained with the inmates, but within the guards were a number of women who had served at the camp as staff. Many of these women were known for their evil treatment, and as mentioned, many were sentenced to death after the war, but what is their story? A lot of the women who were arrested had worked at other sites such as Ravensbrück and Auschwitz, but the women who were placed on trial for their work at Belsen only represented a small percentage of those who had worked at concentration camps. One of the most infamous guards of Bergen-Belsen was Irma Grese, who was known as a beautiful beast, or the Hyena of Auschwitz. She was just 22 when she was executed at the gallows in Hamelin prison for her crimes, and she was considered a young sadistic woman who inflicted suffering, death and misery onto the inmates. She found herself at Bergen-Belsen after she accompanied a prisoner evacuation to there from Ravensbrück, but she was known for being a woman who would beat and kill with her bare hands, and she was seen striking many women with her whip, sometimes to death. She also took part in the selections for the gas chambers at Auschwitz, and she was known to have abused many inmates. She patrolled with a dog and was known for encouraging this to attack them, and Irma Grese was responsible for the deaths of dozens. She went to her death an ardent Nazi, despite being just 22, and it was said of her execution, at 9:34 a.m, she walked into the execution chamber, gazed for a moment at the officials standing round it, then walked onto the centre of the trap, where I'd made the chalk mark. She stood on this mark very firmly, and as I placed a white cap over her head, she said in her voice, "Schnell." The drop crashed down, and the doctor followed me into the pit and pronounced her dead. After 20 minutes, the body was taken down and placed in a coffin, ready for burial. Another brutal and barbaric female guard who found herself transferred to Belsen was Elizabeth Volkenrath, who was 4 years older than Irma Grese, just being 26 when she was executed. Despite her age, she was rather senior, and she became an Oberaufseherin at Auschwitz, being responsible for all the camp selections of female prisoners. This meant she was the one who signed off and decided on sending thousands of women and children to their deaths in the gas chambers. She was also known for instilling fear into inmates, and she was transferred to Belsen in February 1945. She was also executed alongside Irma Grese at Hamelin prison. Johanna Borman became known as a woman with the dogs, and she was a woman who took up a career in the SS to make more money to begin with. She served at a number of sites including Ravensbrück before she was selected for guard duty at Auschwitz. She was known as a weasel, and she would encourage her dog to attack, kill and maim inmates at times. She was an ardent Nazi, and was one of those who was captured at Belsen, and she was forced to make help with the clean-up of the site. She was executed due to her participation in the selections, and also the fact she had committed horrors at Belsen and Auschwitz, and Albert Pierpoint said before her execution, she limped down the corridor looking old and haggard. She was 52, standing only a little over 5 feet. She was trembling, as she was put on the scale. In German she said, "I have my feelings." One woman who served at the start of the war in Ravensbrück was Herta Ehlert, and she was described by one inmate as immensely obese, sly, vicious in character, and an absolute master in using the whip. She was the overseer in charge of the kitchen. Through a small window she would spy on the Jewish women whilst they were at work, peeling potatoes or onions, washing dishes, and doing other chores necessary in the kitchen. Once, Ehlert even ordered the women who were at work to undress completely. After they had stripped, she searched each one extremely thoroughly, looking no doubt for rings, money, wristwatches and other valuables. She remained at her job until the final liquidation of the Plaszow camp. She too was on a death march when the time came for us to retreat along with the Germans. She had worked at Auschwitz and was discovered at Belsen when it was liberated. She was asked if she had committed theft, had committed murder and witnessed many horrific beatings, and she denied everything. However, proving her involvement in selections and murderous antics became tricky, and because of this she was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Ilse Forster also worked at Belsen, and she had been drafted into the SS in August 1944 to work inside the camp. She had worked at Guben before she accompanied the inmates on a death march. She was accused of beating and striking them, especially those who wanted to get more food as they were starving. One witness claimed she beat a girl to death and that she beat a Russian girl to her death. She admitted she had struck this girl but claimed she had not killed her. As she had not worked at Auschwitz, she escaped the death penalty, being imprisoned for 10 years. One of the most recognisable female guards was Herta Bothe, who was known as the sadist of Stutthof, where she worked, beating inmates on a daily basis. She was then sent to Belsen, and she was 6 feet 3 in height, standing out from the other female guards. She was forced to help clear up Belsen after the war, and she protested as she was fearful of contracting typhus from the corpses. She was portrayed at trial as a ruthless overseer, and she admitted hitting and beating inmates with her hands, and she said she never used a stick or weapon to do this, and that she certainly never killed someone. However, there were witnesses who testified that she beat a Hungarian inmate named Ava to death with a wooden block, and another said he saw Herta Bothe shoot 2 inmates for no reason. But she was imprisoned and later released. However, she never recanted her actions. She said in an interview the year before she died that, "Did I make a mistake? No. The mistake was that it was a concentration camp, but I had to go to it. Otherwise I would have been put in it myself. That was my mistake." Another woman placed on trial was Irene Haschka, who was as Ilse Forster was called into service in 1944. She was sent for training before she was transferred and sent to Bergen-Belsen. She admitted she had hit prisoners, saying, "I hit them with my hand, and sometimes I used a stick which I got from the guard. It was an ordinary wooden stick, about 18 inches long, and 3/4 an inch in diameter. It was only necessary to beat prisoners when they were stealing, and I only hit them once or twice." There are allegations that she threw one woman into a pond where she drowned, after she was seen taking water out of a cistern to drink. She was also sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. Gertrude Sauer was a woman who admitted to beating prisoners with bare hands. She worked in the kitchens and would hit prisoners who were suspected of stealing. She was accused of using a riding whip to administer the brutal beatings, and she even admitted that at Belsen the guards were starving inmates. Anna Hempel accompanied prisoners to Belsen, also from Guben, and she said she worked 2 days in the bathhouse and then also in the kitchens. She tried to make out she was a caring guard who tried to appeal for more food for the inmates, but she was noticed beating prisoners barbarically. One woman said she saw a sick man being beaten heavily by Hempel, and that the man collapsed. She also admitted to beating inmates, and she also caught typhus at Belsen. She was also sentenced to 10 years imprisonment. Gertrude Feist worked for the SS at Gross Rosen, before she was also sent to Belsen. She claimed that her job at the site was to stand at the door to see that the working women were doing their job properly and didn't leave the room. She was in effect a bouncer on the door of the bathhouse, but she was found guilty of mistreating inmates, but received a more lenient 5 years in prison. Frida Volta was accused of hitting prisoners with a spade and also wooden tools. She did admit to hitting a number of prisoners who once again stole food, but she claimed she slapped their face. She was portrayed by witnesses as a woman who would administer beatings every day, who took advantage of the prisoners, and who took advantage of the prisoners that would not strike back. She was sentenced to 3 years' imprisonment. The most lenient prison sentence given to the female guards of Belsen came when Hilda Lisewitz was sentenced to just 1 year for her work at the camp. She claimed she did not see the dead bodies, and that she worked at a different part of the camp, and she dismissed what happened there. She had also worked at the site in the kitchens for around 3 months, but had served as an SS guard in other sites for 5 years. People were still trying to push a harsher prosecution for her, even in the last few decades. All of these women were sentenced during the first Belsen Trials. There were other women who were later imprisoned, including Hilda Lobrauer and Johanna Roth, who were capos who were actually inmates that were tasked with working and helping the SS in running the camp. During the second Belsen Trials, more women including Gertrude Heiser, Martha Linker and Annelise Kohlmann were brought to the courtroom, and these were given varying prison sentences for their actions. But the most serious sentences of death that were imposed against the women who were found working at Bergen-Belsen seemed to be the women who also saw service at Auschwitz and were involved in the selections. It is possibly this that was the overriding factor that caused these women such as Irma Grese and Elizabeth Volkenrath to be sent to their deaths, despite the fact other guards such as Herta Bothe were considered brutes, but it was difficult to prove if these women were actually involved in killing. But these women were the Nazi princesses of Bergen-Belsen, whose actions inflicted so much suffering and death. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.